I was standing in my driveway on a bitter January morning in Duluth, Minnesota, watching the snow fall in thick sheets when a silver sedan pulled up in front of my house like it owned the place. The door opened and out stepped a woman in mid-50s wearing a puffy white coat that made her look like an angry marshmallow, and I already knew this was going to be one of those days. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut through the wind. "Are you Peter Brennan?" I set down the snow shovel I'd been using to clear my own driveway and walked toward the property line, keeping my distance. "That's me. Can I help you?" She marched right up, not even bothering to watch where she stepped, her designer boots sinking into the snowbank I'd just created. "I'm Patricia Henderson, president of the Lakewood Estates Homeowners Association. I need to speak with you about your contractual obligations." I blinked at her, genuinely confused. "I'm sorry, what?" "I don't live in Lakewood Estates. I live here." I gestured to my modest two-story house that sat on a half-acre lot on Woodland Avenue, a good quarter-mile from the nearest house in her precious HOA community. Patricia's face pinched like she'd just bitten into a lemon. "I'm well aware of where your property is located. However, you've been using the commercial lot at the north entrance of our community for your snow, plowing business staging area, and according to our records, you're required to maintain snow removal for that lot as part of your usage agreement." My confusion deepened into something closer to disbelief. I run a landscaping business, not a snow plowing operation, and I've never used any lot in your community for anything. I don't even know what lot you're talking about. "Don't play games with me, Mr. Brennan," Patricia snapped, pulling out a tablet from her oversized purse. She jabbed at the screen with one manicured finger. "We have documentation showing that vehicles matching your business trucks have been parked in that lot multiple times over the past 3 years." I held up my hand. "Look, I drive a blue Ford F-150 with Brennan Landscaping on the side. It's a pretty common setup around here. But I've never parked anywhere in Lakewood Estates, never signed any agreement with your HOA, and certainly never agreed to plow anything for you." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "The lot hasn't been plowed in 2 weeks. Our community standards require all common areas to be maintained, and your negligence is creating a safety hazard. I'm giving you 48 hours to clear it, or we'll be taking legal action." "Legal action for what?" I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in it. "You can't sue me for not doing work I never agreed to do. I don't have a contract with you. I've never even spoken to anyone from your HOA before today." "We'll see what our attorneys have to say about that," Patricia said coldly. She turned on her heel, nearly slipping in the snow, and stalked back to her car. Before she got in, she called back, 48 hours, Mr. Brennan. Don't say you weren't warned." I stood there watching her drive away, snowflakes settling on my shoulders, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My landscaping business kept me busy enough during the growing season, but winter was typically quiet. I did some snow removal for a handful of long-term clients, mostly elderly folks who couldn't handle it themselves. But I'd never taken on any commercial contracts. The whole thing was absurd. Inside, I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop. A quick search brought up the Lakewood Estates HOA website, complete with photos of the pristine neighborhood with its uniform houses and perfectly maintained common areas. I'd driven past the entrance a few times, those big stone pillars with Lakewood Estates carved into them, but I'd never had any reason to go inside the development. I pulled up Google Maps and started searching for the lot Patricia had mentioned. The north entrance of Lakewood Estates opened onto Highway 53, and sure enough, there was a small commercial lot right there, maybe half an acre of paved space that looked like it had been intended for a business that never materialized. In the satellite view, I could see it was empty except for some snow. My phone rang, and I glanced at the caller ID. It was Marcus, my buddy from high school who'd become a real estate attorney. I answered immediately. "Marcus, man, I need some advice. The weirdest thing just happened." "Peter, good to hear from you. What's going on?" I explained the entire encounter with Patricia Henderson, not leaving out any details. When I finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "So you're telling me this HOP president showed up at your house and demanded you plow a lot you've never even been to, based on some supposed agreement you never signed?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." Marcus let out a low whistle. "That's bold, even for an HOA. Look, without a written contract, they have no legal standing to demand anything from you. Even if someone else with a similar truck used that lot, that doesn't create any obligation on your part. They'd need your signature on an agreement, period. That's what I figured, but she seemed pretty confident, said she had documentation. Documentation of what? Someone parking there? That doesn't mean anything. Peter, my advice is to document everything. Save any communications they send you. Take photos with timestamps if they contact you again. And whatever you do, don't do any work on that lot. The moment you touch it, they could argue you accepted the terms of some phantom agreement. Got it. Thanks, Marcus. I'll keep you posted if this gets weirder. Please do, and Peter, watch yourself. HOAs can be vindictive when they don't get their way. I've seen some crazy stuff over the years. We hung up, and I spent the rest of the day working on equipment maintenance in my garage, trying to push the whole bizarre situation out of my mind. But it kept gnawing at me. Why would an HOA president show up at my door making demands about a lot I'd never touched? It didn't make sense. The next morning, I woke to find an official-looking envelope wedged in my front door. Inside was a letter printed on Lakewood Estates HOA letterhead. I read it standing in my doorway, my breath forming clouds in the cold air. Dear Mr. Brennan, this letter serves as formal notice that you are in violation of Section 7.3 of the Lakewood Estates Commercial Usage Agreement, which requires all parties utilizing common HOA property for business purposes to maintain said property, including snow removal during winter months. Your continued failure to fulfill this obligation has resulted in unsafe conditions and multiple resident complaints. You have 24 hours from receipt of this notice to bring the property into compliance. Failure to do so will result in fines of $500 per day and potential legal action to recover costs. Sincerely, Patricia Henderson,
HOA President.
I read it twice, then a third time, my anger building with each pass. They'd shortened the deadline and were now threatening daily fines. For a contract I'd never signed, for work I'd never agreed to do. I pulled out my phone and took photos of the letter, then called Marcus again. They just escalated, I said when he answered. Hand-delivered a letter threatening $500 daily fines starting tomorrow. Forward me photos of that letter right now, Marcus said, his voice tight. Peter, this is harassment. They're trying to intimidate you into complying with an agreement that doesn't exist. What should I do? First, you're going to write a formal response. I'll help you draft it. You'll state clearly that you have no contract with the HOA, have never used their property, and consider their threats to be harassment. We'll send it certified mail so there's a record. Then we wait and see if they're stupid enough to actually try to fine you. And if they do, then we take them to court and make them produce this supposed agreement. Without your signature, they have nothing. But Peter, I want you to go to that lot and take photos and video. Get evidence that you've never worked there. Are there any security cameras in the area? I don't know. I'll check it out. An hour later, I was driving my truck down Highway 53 toward the north entrance of Lakewood Estates. The snow had stopped overnight, leaving everything covered in a fresh white blanket. I pulled into the commercial lot Patricia had mentioned and parked near the entrance. The lot was exactly as it appeared in the satellite photos, maybe a little over half an acre of cracked pavement now buried under about 10 inches of snow, no tire tracks, no footprints, nothing to suggest anyone had been here recently. I got out and started taking photos from every angle, then pulled out my phone to shoot video, narrating as I went. This is January 15th, 9:30 in the morning. I'm at the commercial lot on Highway 53 at the north entrance to Lakewood Estates. As you can see, there are no tracks of any kind in this snow, which fell over the past 24 hours. This is the lot the Lakewood Estates HOA claims I'm obligated to plow, despite having no contract or agreement with them. I walked the perimeter of the lot, filming everything. There was a small sign near the road that read, Lakewood Estates Commercial Property, no unauthorized parking, but nothing else. No evidence of any business operation, no equipment, nothing that connected me to this place. As I was finishing up, a truck pulled into the lot behind me. It was a red Dodge Ram with Superior Snow Services painted on the door. A man in his 30s climbed out, looking confused. You with the HOA, he called out. No, I said, walking over, just taking some photos. I'm Peter Brennan. His expression cleared. Oh man, you're the guy. I'm Todd Williams. I actually do have a contract to plow this lot, but the HOA president called me yesterday and said they were terminating my services because they already had someone else handling it. She mentioned your name. My stomach dropped. She what? Yeah, she said Peter Brennan would be taking over snow removal for this lot and a couple others in the development. I was confused because I've been doing it for 2 years, but she was adamant. Said you'd agreed to do it for a better rate. Todd, I need you to understand something. I have never spoken to anyone from that HOA before yesterday. When Patricia Henderson showed up at my house demanding I plow this lot, I've never agreed to anything. I don't have a contract with them. I've never even been to this lot before this morning. Todd's eyes widened. You're serious? Completely serious. Did you get anything in writing about the termination? Just an email. Hold on. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through, then showed me the screen. The email was from an HOA address dated 2 days ago, stating that his services were no longer needed as they'd contracted with a new provider. Can you forward that to me? I gave him my email address. I think something really weird is going on here and I'm going to need evidence. Sure, no problem, man, this is crazy. The HOA still owes me for my last 2 plowing sessions too. I've been trying to get payment for 3 weeks. We exchanged contact information, and Todd promised to send me any other documentation he had. As he drove away, I stood in the empty lot, pieces of a very strange puzzle starting to come together in my mind. Patricia Henderson had fired the actual snowplow contractor and was now trying to force me to do the work for free by claiming I had some non-existent agreement. But why? What could she possibly gain from this? Back home, I found Marcus had emailed me a draft response letter. It was perfect, formal and firm without being aggressive, clearly stating that I had no relationship with the HOA and demanding they cease their harassment. I printed it, signed it, and drove to the post office to send it certified mail. The next morning brought another envelope, this time containing an invoice for $500 for violation of Section 7.3, Commercials Usage Agreement, Day 1. They were actually trying to fine me. I called Marcus immediately. They sent a bill. Perfect. That's evidence of harassment. Don't pay it, obviously. I'm going to draft a cease and desist letter. If they continue after that, we can pursue a harassment claim against the HOA and Patricia Henderson personally. This is insane. Why would she do this? I don't know, but we're going to find out. I'm also going to do some digging into Lakewood Estates HOA records. They're required to file certain documents with the county. Maybe there's something there that explains this. Over the next few days, the fines kept coming. $500 for day 2, $500 for day 3. Each invoice was delivered to my door in an envelope, never mailed, which meant someone was physically coming to my house to leave them. I set up a security camera to catch whoever it was. On the 4th day, my camera caught Patricia Henderson herself walking up my driveway at 6 in the morning to wedge another envelope in my door. I had video evidence of her trespassing on my property to deliver harassment materials. Marcus was thrilled when I showed him. This is gold, Peter. She's digging her own grave here. But things took a darker turn on day 5. I came home from running errands to find a bright orange sticker plastered across my front door. It read, Notice of Lien Lakewood Estates HOA. My hands shook as I peeled it off. Inside was a document claiming the HOA had filed a lien against my property for unpaid fines totaling $2,500. I immediately called Marcus, who told me to get to his office right away. They can't actually do this, can they? I asked, sitting across from him in his downtown Duluth office an hour later. They can file it, but it won't hold up in court. You can't put a lien on someone's property for debts they don't actually owe. But here's the problem. Until it's resolved, this could affect your credit and your ability to sell or refinance your house. We need to challenge this immediately. How do we do that? We're going to court. I'll file a motion to have the lien removed and sue the HOA for harassment, defamation, and filing a fraudulent lien. But, Peter, this is going to cost money. Legal fees, court costs, everything. I rubbed my face with both hands. How much are we talking? Could be 5 to 10,000, depending on how hard they fight. But here's the thing, if we win, and I'm confident we will, we can recover those costs from them plus damages. Let's do it, Marcus nodded. I'll start the paperwork today. In the meantime, I want you to avoid any contact with Patricia Henderson or anyone else from that HOA. Don't respond to any letters. Don't talk to them if they show up at your house, nothing. All communication goes through me now. I left his office feeling both relieved to have representation and anxious about what this was going to cost me, both financially and in terms of stress. When I got home, I found my neighbor, an older woman named Helen who'd lived on Woodland Avenue for 30 years, standing in her yard staring at my house. "Peter, dear, what's going on? There was a woman here earlier putting something on your door, and she didn't look happy." I walked over and explained the situation, keeping it brief. Helen's expression grew increasingly angry as I talked. "That's ridiculous. I've known you since you bought that house 5 years ago. You're the quietest neighbor on the block. You don't cause problems. This HOA has no right to harass you like this." "I appreciate that, Helen. My lawyer and I are handling it." "Well, if you need a witness to testify that you're here most of the time and couldn't possibly be running some snowplowing operation out of an HOA lot, you let me know. I'll be happy to help." Her offer warmed me despite the cold weather. It was good to know someone had my back. The following week, Marcus filed our lawsuit in St. Louis County Court. We were suing the Lakewood Estates HOA and Patricia Henderson personally for harassment, filing a fraudulent lien, and seeking to recover attorney fees and damages. The motion to remove the lien was filed simultaneously. 2 days after the HOA was served with our lawsuit, I got a phone call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered it. "Mr. Brennan, this is Jennifer Chen. I'm an attorney representing the Lakewood Estates Homeowners Association. I'd like to discuss a resolution to this matter. My attorney is Marcus Webb. You should speak with him." "I understand, but I thought perhaps we could resolve this more amicably without involving all communication needs to go through my attorney," I repeated firmly, then hung up. I immediately called Marcus to let him know. He chuckled. "They're scared. Good. Let them sweat a little." A few days later, Marcus called me with news. "I heard from the HOA's attorney. They're claiming they have a signed agreement with you. She says they're going to produce it in discovery." "That's impossible. I never signed anything." "I know, but we need to be prepared for the possibility that they've forged something. It happens more often than you'd think. When they produce this supposed document, we'll have it examined by a forensic document examiner. If it's a forgery, that's a criminal matter." The thought made my blood run cold. Would someone really forge a document just to win an HOA dispute? It seemed insane, but then again, everything about this situation was insane. Our court date for the lien removal motion was set for mid-February. In the meantime, life went on, though the stress of the lawsuit hung over everything. I kept working, maintaining my equipment, checking in with my regular clients to make sure they were ready for spring landscaping. But it was hard to focus when I knew this legal battle was looming. The invoices from the HOA kept coming, now totaling over $7,000 in supposed fines. I saved every single one, documenting their continued harassment despite our lawsuit. Then, about 3 weeks after we filed suit, something interesting happened. I got a phone call from a man named Robert Chen, who identified himself as a resident of Lakewood Estates. "Mr. Brennan, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the court documents, which are public record. I wanted to reach out because I think you should know what's been happening in our community." "I'm listening." Patricia Henderson has been HOA president for about 4 years, and in that time, she's run this place like a dictatorship. She's filed liens against at least 6 other homeowners in our development for various supposed violations, all of them questionable. She's also been accused of misappropriating HOA funds, though nothing's been proven. A group of us have been trying to vote her out, but she's manipulated the bylaws to make it nearly impossible. This was fascinating. Do you know anything about the commercial lot situation? The one she's trying to make me maintain? That's actually what prompted me to call. That lot was supposed to be sold to a developer 3 years ago. The sale would have brought in a significant amount of money to the HOA's reserves, but Patricia blocked it because she wanted to hold out for a higher price. The problem is the HOA budget included that expected revenue. When the sale fell through, we suddenly had a shortage. Patricia has been trying to cut costs anywhere she can, including firing our snow removal contractor because she thought she could force you to do it for free. The pieces clicked into place. She fired Todd Williams and tried to make me do the work without pay to save money. Exactly. And when you refused, she doubled down rather than admit she'd made a mistake. That's how Patricia operates. She never backs down, even when she's wrong. This is helpful information, Robert. Thank you. There's more. Several of us are willing to testify on your behalf if it goes to trial. Patricia has made a lot of enemies in this community, and we'd love to see her held accountable for once. I thanked Robert and immediately called Marcus to relay the conversation. He was pleased. This gives us motive and establishes a pattern of behavior. If we can show the judge that Patricia Henderson has a history of filing fraudulent liens and harassing people, it strengthens our case considerably. On February 10th, we walked into the St. Louis County Courthouse for the hearing on our motion to remove the lien. It was my first time in a courtroom, and despite Marcus's reassurances, I was nervous. Patricia Henderson sat at the defendant's table with her attorney, Jennifer Chen. Patricia looked composed, wearing a conservative navy suit, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She didn't look at me once. Judge Catherine Morrison presided, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She reviewed the documents in front of her, then looked up. This is a motion to remove a lien filed by the Lakewood Estates Homeowners Association against property owned by Peter Brennan. Ms. Chen, your client filed this lien claiming Mr. Brennan owes fines for violation of a commercial usage agreement. Do you have a copy of this agreement? Jennifer Chen stood. Your Honor, we're still compiling our documentation. We have evidence that Mr. Brennan's business vehicles were observed using HOA property, which under our bylaws constitutes acceptance of our terms. That's not how contracts work, Ms. Chen, Judge Morrison said dryly. You can't create a binding agreement simply by observing someone's vehicle in a parking lot. Do you have Mr. Brennan's signature on any agreement? We're working to locate the original signed document, Your Honor. So that's a no. Judge Morrison turned to Marcus. Mr. Webb? Marcus stood, projecting confidence. Your Honor, my client has never signed any agreement with the Lakewood Estates HOA. He's never used their property, never contracted with them for any services, and was not even aware of the existence of this lot until the HOA president showed up at his home making demands. This lien is fraudulent and part of a pattern of harassment that has included daily threatening letters, trespassing to deliver those letters, and now filing a lien that has damaged my client's credit and ability to conduct normal financial affairs. Your Honor, that's a gross mischaracterization, Jennifer Chen began, but the judge held up her hand. Ms. Chen, unless you can produce a signed agreement right now, I'm inclined to grant this motion. Your client filed a lien without proper documentation. That's serious. Jennifer Chen and Patricia Henderson had a whispered conversation. Finally, Jennifer said, Your Honor, we request a continuance to locate the signed agreement. Judge Morrison looked unimpressed. Ms. Chen, either the agreement exists or it doesn't. If it exists, you should be able to produce it. I'm not inclined to leave a potentially fraudulent lien in place while you go on a fishing expedition. She paused, then said, However, I'll give you 2 weeks. If you can produce a signed agreement with Mr. Brennan's legitimate signature by February 24th, we'll reconvene. If you cannot, the lien will be removed and you'll be facing sanctions. Is that clear? Yes, Your Honor. We left the courthouse into the cold February afternoon. Marcus was satisfied with the outcome. 2 weeks. They're not going to find anything because nothing exists. When we come back, that lien comes off and we move forward with the full harassment suit. What if they forge something? Then they're committing a crime and we'll prove it. Peter, try not to worry. We're winning. But I did worry. Over the next 2 weeks, I barely slept, imagining scenarios where Patricia Henderson somehow produced a document with what looked like my signature. Could they have gotten a signature from something else and transferred it? Was that even possible? I also started receiving anonymous phone calls. My phone would ring, I'd answer, and there would be silence followed by someone hanging up. It happened a dozen times over those 2 weeks. I couldn't prove it was related to the HOA situation, but the timing was suspicious. Then, 5 days before our court date, something happened that changed everything. I got a call from Todd Williams, the snowplow contractor the HOA had fired. Peter, you need to hear this. I just got off the phone with a guy named Dennis Murphy. He used to be on the Lakewood Estates HOA board until Patricia Henderson pushed him out last year. He contacted me because he heard about your lawsuit and he has information. What kind of information? He says Patricia forged multiple documents when she was trying to get control of the HOA budget. He has copies of original documents that she altered, including meeting minutes and financial reports. He's been sitting on this stuff, afraid to come forward, but your lawsuit made him realize he needed to speak up. Can you give me his contact information? Todd provided a phone number, and I immediately called Dennis Murphy. He was a man in his late 50s who sounded exhausted even over the phone. Mr. Brennan, thank you for calling. I should have come forward sooner, but I was afraid Patricia would retaliate against me. She's vindictive. I'm learning that. Todd said you have evidence of document forgery. Yes. When I was on the board, Patricia wanted to allocate funds for what she called community improvements, but several of us thought the expenditures were questionable and possibly benefiting her personally. We voted against it. A week later, Patricia produced meeting minutes that showed we'd voted in favor. Our signatures were on the document, but the content had been altered. I kept my original copy and they don't match. My heart was racing. Dennis, would you be willing to testify about this in court? Yes. I've already contacted your attorney, Marcus Webb. I'm meeting with him tomorrow to provide my documentation. When I called Marcus, he was already aware. Dennis Murphy called me an hour ago. Peter, this is huge. If Patricia Henderson has a history of forging documents, it completely discredits anything she tries to produce as your supposed agreement. I'm meeting with him tomorrow, and if his evidence is as solid as he claims, we might be able to get the authorities involved. The police? Document forgery is a crime. If she's been doing this systematically, the St. Louis County Attorney's Office might be interested. The next day, Marcus called me after his meeting with Dennis Murphy. Peter, you need to come to my office. We need to talk about next steps. When I arrived, Dennis Murphy was there, a thin man with graying hair and tired eyes. Spread across Marcus's conference table were photocopies of various HOA documents, each marked with colored tabs. Peter, meet Dennis. Dennis, this is Peter Brennan. We shook hands and Dennis gave me a sympathetic look. I'm sorry you got caught up in Patricia's schemes. She's been out of control for years, and the rest of us have been too scared or too apathetic to stop her. Marcus gestured to the documents. Dennis has provided evidence of at least 4 instances where Patricia Henderson altered official HOA documents. In each case, she changed meeting minutes, financial reports, or vote tallies to reflect outcomes that benefited her agenda. He has original copies that show what was actually decided, and forged copies that Patricia distributed afterward. I picked up one of the documents, a meeting minute from 2 years ago. Even to my untrained eye, I could see that the signature section looked off, like it had been copied from somewhere else. This is unbelievable, I said. It gets worse, Dennis continued. Patricia has also been paying herself a management fee of $2,000 per month from HOA funds. The bylaws don't authorize any compensation for board members, but she created an amendment that supposedly passed at a special meeting. Except that meeting never happened. She forged all the votes. Marcus leaned forward. Here's what I propose. We take this evidence to the St. Louis County Attorney's Office and file a criminal complaint. Simultaneously, we use this at our hearing to show Judge Morrison that Patricia Henderson cannot be trusted to produce legitimate documents. Even if she brings something with your signature on it, we can argue it's likely forged given her history. What are the chances they'll actually prosecute her? I asked. With this much evidence? Pretty good. Document forgery, embezzlement of HOA funds, filing fraudulent liens, these are serious crimes. The county attorney's office takes financial crimes seriously, especially when they involve breach of fiduciary duty. Dennis looked pained. I just want her out of power. She's destroyed our community. Half the neighborhood is afraid to park their own cars in their driveways for fear she'll cite them for some violation. It's gotten that bad. We spent the next 2 hours going through every document Dennis had brought, with Marcus taking detailed notes. By the time we finished, we had a solid case not just for removing the lien and winning our harassment suit, but for potential criminal prosecution of Patricia Henderson. The following day, Marcus and Dennis went to the St. Louis County Attorney's Office to file a formal complaint. I stayed home, partly because I had work to do, and partly because I was so anxious I could barely think straight. This had gone from a bizarre HOA dispute to a potential criminal case, and I was right in the middle of it. That evening, Marcus called with an update. The county attorney is interested. They're going to investigate. In the meantime, they've asked us not to discuss the criminal complaint publicly because they don't want to tip off Patricia before they're ready to act. What does that mean for our court date? We proceed as planned. We'll present our case for removing the lien, but we won't mention the criminal investigation yet. Let's see what Patricia and her attorney bring to the table. February 24th arrived cold and gray. Marcus and I met at the courthouse an hour before the hearing, and he briefed me on what to expect. If they produce a document with your signature, don't react visibly. Let me handle it. We'll request to have it examined by a forensic document expert. If they don't produce anything, the lien comes off and we move to trial on the harassment claims. Got it. We entered the courtroom to find Patricia Henderson and Jennifer Chen already seated. Patricia looked less composed than last time, her makeup a little heavier, her expression tight. Jennifer Chen looked resigned, which I took as a good sign. Judge Morrison called the hearing to order. Mrs. Chen, we're here to determine whether the lien your client filed against Mr. Brennan's property should be removed. At our last hearing, I gave you 2 weeks to produce the signed agreement that supposedly obligates Mr. Brennan to maintain HOA property. Do you have that document? Jennifer Chen stood slowly. Your Honor, after extensive searching, we've been unable to locate the original signed agreement. However, we have testimony from multiple Lakewood Estates residents who observed Mr. Brennan's vehicles in the commercial lot in question. Mrs. Chen, I don't care if 100 people saw his truck. Without a signed contract, there's no obligation. Observation doesn't create a binding agreement. Judge Morrison's voice was sharp with irritation. Your client filed a lien against this man's property without proper documentation. That's not just sloppy, it's potentially illegal. Your Honor, we acted in good faith based on good faith requires having an actual contract, Ms. Chen. I've heard enough. The lien is hereby removed from Mr. Brennan's property, effective immediately. Additionally, I'm sanctioning the Lakewood Estates HOA in the amount of $5,000, payable to Mr. Brennan for the costs and damages incurred by this improper lien. Do you understand? Jennifer Chen looked like she wanted to disappear. Yes, Your Honor. Furthermore, if I see anything remotely like this cross my desk again involving your client, I'll hold Ms. Henderson personally in contempt. Is that clear? Yes, Your Honor. Judge Morrison turned to Marcus. Mr. Webb, I understand you have a pending lawsuit against the HOA for harassment? Yes, Your Honor. Given today's outcome, we're prepared to proceed to trial unless the defendants wish to discuss settlement. I suggest you do discuss settlement, Ms. You've lost credibility with this court, and I don't imagine a jury would be any more sympathetic. We're adjourned. Outside the courtroom, Marcus was elated. That went even better than I hoped. $5,000 in sanctions, the lien removed, and the judge basically told them they're going to lose if this goes to trial. They'll settle. What happens now? Jennifer Chen will talk to her client, probably tell her that fighting this further is pointless and expensive. Within a week, I'm betting we'll have a settlement offer. They'll pay your attorney fees, additional damages, and probably agree to a consent order prohibiting future contact with you. What about the criminal investigation? That's moving independently. The county attorney's office will conduct their investigation, and if they find enough evidence, they'll file charges. Our civil case doesn't depend on that, though if Patricia gets charged, it certainly helps our position. We were walking to the parking lot when I saw Patricia Henderson standing by a black Mercedes, talking animatedly on her phone. When she saw me looking, her expression twisted into something ugly, and she ended her call. You think you've won, she called out, but you have no idea what you've started. Marcus immediately stepped between us. Mrs. Henderson, you need to stop. Any further contact with my client could be considered witness intimidation. I'm not intimidating anyone, I'm simply stating facts. Patricia, get in the car, Jennifer Chen said, appearing from behind us. Don't say another word. Patricia glared at me for another long moment, then got into her Mercedes and drove away with more force than necessary. Jennifer Chen sighed. Mr. Webb, I apologize for my client's behavior. I'll be in touch about settlement discussions. Over the next week, things moved quickly. Jennifer Chen reached out to Marcus with a settlement offer. The HOA would pay $30,000 in damages, cover all attorney fees, issue a formal apology, and agree to a permanent consent order prohibiting any contact with me. In exchange, we'd drop the harassment lawsuit. Marcus advised me to take it. It's a good offer, Peter. You'd get full compensation, they admit wrongdoing, and you're protected from future harassment. If we go to trial, we might get more, but it'll take months and there's always some risk. What about Patricia? She just gets to walk away. From our lawsuit, yes. But remember, there's still the criminal investigation. That's separate. I agreed to the settlement, and the papers were signed on March 5th. The HOA's check arrived a week later, and just like that, the civil case was over. $30,000 plus attorney fees, and the knowledge that I'd fought back and won. But the story wasn't quite finished. On March 18th, I got a call from an investigator with the St. Louis County Attorney's Office named Detective Sarah Martinez. She asked if I could come in to give a statement about my experiences with Patricia Henderson and the HOA. I met her at the county offices in Duluth, and over the course of 2 hours, I recounted everything. Patricia showing up at my house, the threatening letters, the fraudulent lien, all of it. Detective Martinez took detailed notes and recorded the interview. Mr. Brennan, I want you to know that we're taking this case very seriously. Based on evidence provided by Dennis Murphy and others, we believe Ms. Henderson has committed multiple felonies, including forgery, embezzlement, and filing false liens. Your case is part of a larger pattern. How many other people has she done this to? At least 8 that we've identified so far. She's been systematically defrauding the HOA and its members for years. What happens next? We're finalizing our investigation. Within the next few weeks, we'll present our findings to a grand jury. If they return an indictment, Miss Henderson will be arrested and charged. The grand jury met in early April, and on April 9th, I got a call from Marcus. Turn on the news. I grabbed my remote and flipped it to the local station. There on screen was footage of Patricia Henderson being led out of her house in handcuffs by St. Louis County deputies. The banner at the bottom read, "Local HOA President Arrested on Fraud Charges." The news anchor explained that Patricia Henderson had been indicted on 15 counts of forgery, embezzlement, filing fraudulent liens, and theft by swindle. The total amount she'd allegedly stolen from the HOA exceeded $200,000 over 4 years. I sat on my couch, watching the footage replay, feeling a strange mix of vindication and sadness. Vindication because this woman had tried to ruin me over absolutely nothing, and now she was facing real consequences. Sadness because it had all been so unnecessary. If she'd just admitted her mistake when I first told her I had no agreement with the HOA, none of this would have happened. Over the following months, Patricia Henderson's case worked its way through the criminal justice system. Her attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the county attorney's office wasn't interested in being lenient. The evidence was overwhelming. Dennis Murphy testified, I testified, Todd Williams testified about being fired so Patricia could try to force me to work for free, and 7 other Lakewood Estates residents testified about Patricia's various schemes and frauds. The trial took place in August. I attended several days of it, watching Patricia sit at the defense table, looking nothing like the confident, aggressive woman who'd shown up at my house 8 months earlier. She looked small and defeated. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all 15 counts. Patricia Henderson was sentenced to 6 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution to the Lakewood Estates HOA and all the individuals she'd defrauded, including the $5,000 in sanctions Judge Morrison had ordered plus additional damages. After the sentencing, I stood on the courthouse steps with Dennis Murphy, Marcus, and several other Lakewood Estates residents who'd testified. I can't believe it's finally over, Dennis said. 4 years of her tyranny and it's done. What happens to the HOA now, I asked. We held emergency elections last month. Completely new board, new bylaws, new everything. We're basically starting from scratch, but at least we have a chance to do it right this time. Marcus put a hand on my shoulder. Peter, you did good. You could have just paid her off early on to make the problem go away, but you stood your ground. That took courage. I just didn't want to be bullied into doing something I never agreed to do. Well, Char's stubbornness saved a lot of people from her schemes. You should be proud. We all went to dinner that night, a celebratory meal at a restaurant overlooking Lake Superior. The conversation flowed easily, stories shared about the investigation, the trial, the absurdity of the whole situation. But underneath it all, I kept thinking about how quickly things could spiral out of control, how one person's dishonesty and ego could cause so much damage to so many people. A few weeks later, I received a letter from the new Lakewood Estates HOA board. They apologized for everything that had happened, praised my courage in standing up to Patricia Henderson, and offered me a legitimate contract to provide landscaping services for their common areas come spring. The terms were fair, the pay was good, and the irony wasn't lost on me. I declined politely. I'd had enough of Lakewood Estates to last a lifetime. Instead, I focused on growing my business. The publicity from the case, surprisingly, brought in new clients. People liked the story of a small business owner standing up to a corrupt HOA, and they wanted to support me. By fall, I'd hired 2 part-time employees to help with the increased workload. Helen, my neighbor, brought over cookies one afternoon in September. We sat on my porch watching the leaves begin to change colors, and she said, "You know, Peter, I've lived on this street for 30 years. I've seen a lot of people come and go. But I've never seen anyone handle themselves with as much integrity as you did through all that mess. Your parents raised you right." Thanks, Helen. There were days I wasn't sure I was doing the right thing, if I should just pay them off and move on. But you didn't, and that matters. You held them accountable. That Henderson woman would still be stealing from people if you hadn't fought back. She was right. And sitting there on that September afternoon, the stress and anxiety of the past year finally beginning to fade, I realized that sometimes doing the right thing is messy and expensive and scary, but it's still worth doing. Patricia Henderson had tried to force me into a contract I never signed, tried to bully me into free labor, tried to put a lien on my house and ruin my reputation, and she'd failed because I'd refused to back down. The following spring, I drove past the north entrance to Lakewood Estates and saw that someone had finally sold that commercial lot. A small coffee shop was being built there, the construction humming along under a bright April sky. The lot was properly maintained now, the landscaping fresh and professional. It looked good. I didn't stop. I had my own clients to visit, my own business to run. The HOA drama was behind me, filed away as one of those crazy stories you tell at parties when someone asks about your most bizarre experience. But the lessons stayed with me. Stand your ground, document everything, get good legal advice, and never underestimate how far some people will go to avoid admitting they're wrong. Life moved on. I expanded my business to include hardscaping, bought a new truck, even started dating someone I'd met through a client referral. The $30,000 settlement from the HOA helped me upgrade my equipment and build a financial cushion for the business. Patricia Henderson's criminal restitution payments trickled in monthly, adding to that cushion. Dennis Murphy and I stayed in touch. He'd become something of a local hero in Lakewood Estates, the whistleblower who'd helped bring down a tyrant. The new HOA board operated transparently, published detailed financial reports quarterly, and actually listened to residents' concerns. It was everything an HOA should be, but so rarely is. Todd Williams got a new contract with a different development, one that paid on time and treated him with respect. He sent me a text occasionally, thanking me for exposing Patricia's schemes because it had validated his own experiences and helped him understand he wasn't crazy for thinking something was wrong. As for Patricia Henderson herself, she served her time at the Women's Correctional Facility in Shakopee. I didn't follow her story closely, didn't visit or send letters or gloat over her downfall. I'd moved on. But I heard through the grapevine that she continued to maintain her innocence, claiming she'd been railroaded by people who didn't understand how HOAs needed to be run. Even in prison, she couldn't admit what she'd done. 2 years after her sentencing, I was working on a garden installation for a client when Marcus called out of the blue. "Peter, you'll never believe this. Remember how we suspected Patricia might have done this kind of thing before? Yeah, she did. I just got off the phone with an attorney in Wisconsin. Patricia was on an HOA board near Minneapolis before she moved to Duluth, and she pulled similar stunts there. filed false liens, embezzled funds, forged documents. They never prosecuted because she moved away and they just wanted her gone, but they're willing to testify if it helps keep her in prison longer. Why are you telling me this? Because her parole hearing is coming up next year, and the county attorney's office is building a case to oppose early release. They want to show she's a serial offender, not someone who made a one-time mistake. Your testimony, combined with this new evidence, could keep her behind bars longer. I thought about it for a moment, kneeling there in the dirt with a flat of petunias beside me, the spring sun warm on my back. Did I want to be involved in this again? Did I want to dredge up those memories and that stress? Send me the details, I said finally. If my testimony helps protect other people from what she did to me, I'll do it. And I did. When Patricia Henderson's parole hearing came around, I was one of 12 people who testified about her pattern of fraud and manipulation. The parole board denied her request, and she remained in prison to serve her full sentence. By that point, it was just another chapter in a story that had long since closed for me. My business was thriving. I'd proposed to my girlfriend Zara, and she'd said yes, and life was good. The HOA nightmare had become exactly what it should be, a cautionary tale, a reminder of why documentation matters, and why you should never sign a contract without reading it, and conversely, why no one can hold you to a contract you never signed. Sometimes I'd drive past that coffee shop on Highway 53, the one built on the lot Patricia Henderson had tried to force me to plow for free. I'd smile, remembering how absurd it all was, how a simple "no, I don't work for you" had spiraled into criminal investigations and prison sentences. But mostly I'd just keep driving, heading to my next job, living my life, grateful that I'd stood my ground when it mattered. The story spread in local business circles, became something of a legend. Did you hear about the landscaper who took down a corrupt HOA president? People would say, and while I appreciated the recognition, I never felt like a hero. I'd just been a guy trying to do his job, trying to run his business honestly, who refused to be bullied into accepting responsibility for something he'd never agreed to do. That's the thing about dealing with people like Patricia Henderson. They count on others being too tired, too scared, too conflict-averse to fight back. They count on people taking the path of least resistance, accepting blame they don't deserve, paying fines they don't owe just to make the problem go away. And most of the time, that strategy works. Most people do give in, but not everyone does. And when someone finally stands their ground, documents everything, gets good legal representation, and refuses to back down, the whole house of cards comes tumbling down. That's what happened with Patricia Henderson. I wasn't special or particularly brave. I just said no and stuck with it, and that was enough. Years from now, when I tell this story to my kids, I'll focus on that lesson. Stand up for yourself, even when it's hard, even when it costs money and time and peace of mind, Sybil. Because the alternative, allowing yourself to be manipulated and defrauded, costs more in the long run. It costs your integrity, your self-respect, and your belief that doing the right thing matters. I never did sign that contract with Lakewood Estates for landscaping services, but I did occasionally work for individual homeowners in that development. They were good people, victims of Patricia's schemes, just like I'd been. They appreciated having their neighborhood back, having an HOA that actually served their interests instead of one person's ego and greed. And every time I drove through those stone pillars with Lakewood Estates carved into them, I'd remember that morning in January when Patricia Henderson first showed up at my house, demanding I plow a lot I'd never seen. I'd remember thinking, this is the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. I had no idea then how weird it would get, how far she'd go to try to make me comply, how many crimes she'd committed in service of her power trip. But I also remembered the moment in Judge Morrison's courtroom when the lien was removed, when justice prevailed, when standing my ground paid off. I remembered the look on Patricia's face when she was led away in handcuffs, the validation of knowing I'd been right all along. And I remembered the thank you notes I received from other Lakewood Estates residents, people whose lives improved because I'd fought back. That's what made it all worthwhile. Not the settlement money, though that certainly helped. Not the publicity or the reputation boost for my business, though those were nice. What made it worthwhile was knowing that sometimes, when you do the right thing purely because it's right, good things happen. Justice prevails. The bad guys lose. And ordinary people standing up for themselves can make a real difference. So that's my story about the time an HOA demanded I plow their lot even though I never worked for them and never signed a single document. It's a story about standing firm, getting help when you need it, and never underestimating the importance of a paper trail. It's a story about how one person's dishonesty can unravel spectacularly when someone finally calls them on it. And it's a reminder that in America, no one can force you to work for free. No one can hold you to a contract you never signed. And when organizations abuse their power, there are still systems in place to hold them accountable. The justice system worked the way it was supposed to work. The bad guy went to prison. The victims got restitution. And life went on better than before. I'm back to being just a landscaper in Duluth, Minnesota, running my business, taking care of my clients, living my life. But for a while there, I was the guy who fought City Hall, or in this case, fought an HOA president, and won. And that's not a bad thing to have on your resume, even if you never planned for it to be there. The end of the story isn't dramatic. There's no final confrontation, no last-minute twist. Just the steady march of justice, the rebuilding of a community freed from a tyrant's control, and one very relieved landscaper going back to work. Sometimes that's how these things end, not with a bang, but with the quiet satisfaction of knowing you did the right thing, and it mattered. And every winter, when the snow falls thick over Duluth and I'm out clearing driveways for my regular clients, I pass that commercial lot, now thriving coffee shop with its own maintenance contract with a proper snow removal company. I never touch it, never will. But I smile every time I see it, because that lot represents something important. The place where I drew a line in the snow and said no, and meant it, and won. That's worth more than any contract ever could be.